An acclaimed writer, lecturer, and music composer, Dr. Will Tuttle has held seminars widely throughout North America and Europe on his book, The World Peace Diet, Eating for Spiritual Health and Social Harmony. In this book, he reveals how our mistreatment of animals hinders us from reaching our own freedom and joy. Dr. Tuttle is well versed in the philosophies of both Eastern and Western cultures. He has practiced meditation for more than 30 years and spent time in South Korea as a Zen monk. In his lectures, he delves into the historical, social, and spiritual aspects of all that humanity has lost through the practice of animal agriculture. He also proposes what we stand to gain by leaving the culture of animal farming, choosing instead to expand our compassion once more to all beings. Please join us for highlights from Dr. Tuttle's lecture and the first part of our interview with the author.
In your book, you talk about mythos. And I wanted to ask you if you can elaborate on what mythos means.
Every culture has a mythos. Every culture has a set of stories that explain and give meaning to the lives of the people who live in that culture. And one of the main ways the mythos of any culture is injected into the children is through food, is through the meals. It's like every day, day after day after day, and it's very powerful. The underlying mythos of our culture is that we reduce beings to things. We reduce certain living beings to the status of only being things, to being just a piece of meat that we're going to use, to being a commodity that we own, like property.
What is the new mythos that you envision for our future?
The new mythos that I envision for our future, which I think is calling us, actually it's an ancient mythos. The new word for this mythos is veganism or vegan living. Veganism is simply looking at beings as beings rather than looking at beings as things, as commodities. Veganism is a new word. It was only invented in 1944 by Donald Watson. And maybe I'll just give a quick definition. Donald Watson said, veganism is a philosophy and way of life which seeks to exclude, as far as possible and practical, all forms of cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. The real underlying reason for veganism is compassion for all life, caring for others. And I think all of us as human beings have a fundamental core of compassion for animals and for others, because we know we would not want to be confined and stabbed and have these things done to us, and so we are naturally very, very reticent to do it to animals. Back, for example, to India, and many of the religions in India, Jainism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Vedanta, and the whole Asian philosophy. There are roots of this in the Western tradition as well. Anyone who has a dog or a cat as a companion animal or has seen animals, we know that they do feel pain. They have not only physical pain, but they feel psychological pain as well. Some people will say, well, but when you're eating plants, then you're somehow killing them. Plant agriculture, I think from the very beginning, has to do with working with the earth and working with the cycles of the earth and working in harmony and working with the miracle of life and with fertility and encouraging plants to grow and nourishing them. A lot of the plants just give fruits and herbs and seeds and nuts. And this sense of the abundance and love of the universe just feeding us with foods that look delicious, that taste delicious. There's a sense, bright colors, they're attractive, they're round, you can hold them in your hand, they're juicy, they're sweet, they're tasty, you can eat them very often raw.
Please stay tuned as our program continues featuring Dr. Will Tuttle, acclaimed author of The World Peace Diet, Eating for Spiritual Health and Social Harmony. Welcome back to our meeting with Dr. Will Tuttle, an esteemed advocate of veganism as a way to transform our shared human destiny for the better in all aspects of life. In the following part of his lecture, Dr. Tuttle answers an audience member's question of how to effectively share the vegan lifestyle with others.
Our job as people who understand some of these ideas is to become effective in helping people to reconnect with the love that is shining in our hearts all the time, to look with eyes that see beings rather than seeing things, and to help build a sense of love. So I think the core of the teaching really is to spread a sense of radical inclusion and to include everyone within the sphere of our compassion. I think one important thing is, I believe honestly, is to, within my own consciousness, to take responsibility for my world. Because I can't, in a sense, I can't ever change another person. What I can do is change myself. You think of someone like Supreme Master Ching Hai, who embodies it at such a deep level. Through her example alone, she can have thousands of people going vegan, because she lives it so deeply, that it's just, the ripple, when she throws a pebble in the pond, it makes a huge tidal wave, because where she comes from is so deep. I think each one of us can move in that direction where, as we grow spiritually, we'll naturally be able to plant the seeds more deeply. So I think it's a spiritual path, essentially. We're here to give. We're here to bless others. That's why I love the teachings of Supreme Master Ching Hai. The whole idea is we're here to bless the world. We're here to give to the world. We're here, the greatest joy we have is in celebrating our life with others. And so I think the new vision that veganism is the ancient vision that we're all interconnected, that our welfare is interconnected, that as we bless the animals and let them live their lives, we'll get to live our lives. The cow and the chicken and the pig, all these animals, they have a purpose, and they want to live their purpose. They want to they want to fulfill their niche in the ecosystem, in the web of life. But then we pull them out of that. It's a very violent act, and we steal them and we stick them in factory farms, in confined animal feeding operations, and we say, now your purpose is my purpose. I'm going to eat your body. I'm going to steal your children. And we steal their purposes, and what has happened to us? We have lost our purpose. That, I think, is the most serious spiritual crisis facing Western civilization today, maybe the whole planet today. The ancient spiritual teachings always said, whatever you most want for yourself, give it to others. If I want freedom for myself, give others freedom. If I want love, if I want to be loved, then to be loving. If I want to have a sense of abundance and receive, then be generous. The more we give, whatever we give out will come back. And so this is why it's the most liberating, most delicious way of living is to eat a vegan, plant-based diet. I know my wonderful spouse, Madeline, we've been vegans now almost 30 years. I've never been to a doctor in 28 years. We don't even have to go to a drugstore and buy aspirin or Tylenol or all these things everybody has to buy. Because, we're living in harmony with the larger order. We're healthy. The food is delicious. And, in fact, it gets more and more delicious because I think as a vegan, we just love, thinking where the food comes from. But if I'm eating bacon or a hamburger or fish or something, I think, I don't want to even think where that came from. I don't even want to know. So pretty soon. And so It's really a path of enormous joy and health and satisfaction, celebration, delicious food. You're not giving up anything. To people who are not vegan, who are still eating meat and dairy, we say, please join us. Come on out and be a vegan and eat plant-based foods like we are. It's a win-win-win. It's win on every level. It's better health, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, environmentally, culturally. The wholeness of our life is that we are all connected. And the animals are waiting for us. The animals are pleading with us, please wake up, human beings. Wake up and realize you're not predatory. You're not violent. You're loving. And I think when human beings transform themselves, the blessings of heaven will come pouring down. And I think even the animals will change. Everything will change because as we evolve, we help create an energy field on this planet of peace and harmony. And the animals will also get more in tune with that, and we'll create a world of much greater peace we can't even imagine.
Thank you for joining us for the first part of our program featuring Dr. Will Tuttle, a longtime vegan and profound author of The World Peace Diet, Eating for Spiritual Health and Social Harmony. Please join us again for the continuation of our interview as Dr. Tuttle further puts forth the compelling case for an animal-free diet. Now, please stay tuned for our noble lineage right after noteworthy news here on Supreme Master Television. Dr. Will Tuttle shares a vision that everything is connected when we look deeply into the type of food we eat. The environment, animals, future generations, government and the law, the economy, religion, science and education, everything forms an intricate network. In his highly acclaimed book, The World Peace Diet, Dr. Tuttle shows the far-reaching implications of food in our culture. Our mentality towards food affects our lives at every level, from environmental to spiritual. Please join us for the second part of our interview with gifted international speaker, composer, and author Dr. Will Tuttle as he discusses some of the ideas in The World Peace Diet, Eating for Spiritual Health and Social Harmony.
Most of us in this country and in our world yearn for a world where peace is possible, where justice and kindness and compassion and freedom are possible, and where not just possible, but they're actually manifesting, where there's abundance for everyone. The problem that we have, I believe, is the whole idea of commodifying animals and holding them in prisons, basically, by the tens of thousands. Yet I'm so delighted that there are people who are willing to look at this and to have a conversation about it and to actually change their behaviors. And when we see the history of what we do to animals and see it in the larger context, we realize that it's intimately connected with all of our problems, that we have problems where we're devastating the earth environmentally, we have problems where people are exploited and oppressed, where they are going hungry. And all of these problems, I think, are connected to the historical development of using animals for food. Around 8,000 or 10,000 years ago, people, for the first time, started looking at animals as, potentially anyway, as property that was owned. Before that, people did not herd animals, or did not own them as food. And when anthropologists look at this, we see that it was a profound revolution. It was a revolution where beings that had been seen as mysterious cohabitants of the earth with us, and were basically respected for that, began to be owned as property, and they began to be reduced to the status of commodities. And so they started this project of confining them, of selectively breeding them, and that so the feminine dimension, the female animals, was especially targeted as being manipulated and dominated. And then we had, for the first time, this huge transformation of culture where slavery actually began to be commonly practiced, and war started. The very first wars that were ever appeared on the planet, it was that the wealthy elite that emerged, that owned the cap. Old word in Latin for head is capita, which means head. The proto-capitalists of that time, they learned that the fastest way that they could get rich quick was to go and have a war. And if they won the war, then they would get all of that capital. They'd get all of those sheep and goats and cows. They won the war. So we had the situation develop where animals were reduced to mere things, women were reduced to mere chattel property, and men became more capable of sustained violence. It takes a lot of violence to control these large, powerful animals. And so you had a whole culture that evolved gradually to be able to control animals and dominate them with violence. If you look at plant agriculture, it's just the opposite. Plant agriculture is something that was mostly done by women, and it brings out the best in us. I mean, the idea is we're working with in harmony with the earth. We're planting seeds. These beautiful things are growing. We're watering them. We're nurturing them. We're caring for them. We're protecting them. And the miracle of life unfolds, and we get to eat of the fruits of those things, and they're delicious and nurturing, and there's no violence, there's no fear, they're not trying to run away, they're not trying to escape, you're not stealing their babies. It just brings out the best. It's this whole sense of the benevolence and the abundance and the fertility and the miracle of life, and it's all a great blessing. And so we can live from plants. It's a blessing to be given from the gifts of the earth, but as soon as we start eating animal foods, we're in domination, violence, and we're cutting off our feelings. The animals are terribly stressed by what we do to them, and when we plant that stress in them, it comes back to us.
Please stay tuned as our program continues with Dr. Will Tuttle, acclaimed author of The World Peace Diet, Eating for Spiritual Health and Social Harmony. You're watching A Journey Through Aesthetic Realms on Supreme Master Television. Welcome back to A Journey Through Aesthetic Realms and our meeting with Dr. Will Tuttle, whose extensive research led to his proposal of a diet for world peace. World Peace Diet is the title of his book, referring to a vegan lifestyle that could potentially transform the human culture greatly for the better.
When we look deeply into the environmental problems that we're facing, into the cultural problems we're facing, into the spiritual shallowness, really, in many ways of our culture, we see that it's all in many ways driven by one fundamental force, which is this ritual injection into our consciousness through daily meals of a mentality of reductionism, commodification, exclusion, and exploitation and oppression of other living beings. And once we do that to animals routinely, then we just develop this mentality where it's easy to do that to other human beings as well. And we can justify wars, we can justify the devastation of the oceans and the rainforests. In fact, we can not only justify it, we can just basically ignore it like it doesn't matter. And I think ultimately what we're talking about here is an awakening from the trance that has been imposed on us by our culture, and the culture awakening from its trance that has been imposed on it by 10,000 years of seeing beings merely as things to be dominated and controlled. It's as we awaken that the culture will awaken. So it's up to each one of us to find our unique way of understanding and acting on this understanding, of contributing to the awakening that will help us to deal with the problems that we're creating. The animal agriculture is the driving force behind the loss of habitat, behind the destruction of the oceans, behind the destruction of the rainforests and the temperate forests. This driving need for massive amounts of grain and soybeans and legumes to feed animals while people are starving.
In your book, you talk about war and starvation and disease and other calamities and how they relate to the meat and dairy industry. Could you just elaborate on how they're connected?
They are connected on multiple levels. There's a great quote I have in my book by a Zen master from Vietnam, Thich Nhat Hanh. He talks about how we in the West, especially who are eating lots of meat and dairy and eggs, are overeating. He said, you people who are eating meat, dairy, and eggs are actually eating the flesh of the starving children, who are poor in the sense that they don't have a lot of money and cannot buy the grain that they need to eat, because we have more money and we buy the grain, and we raise the price and we buy the grain just to feed to our pigs and our chickens and our cows and our fish. The factory farm fishing is a huge operation. So that right there sets up the stage for war, because when you have mothers and fathers who see their babies starving, malnourished, they want to get their land back. They want to be able to live and eat like they used to be able to. There's so many other connections. For example, there's an ancient spiritual teaching that says, as we sow, so shall we reap. You know, whatever we do to others will come back to us. They're working in an environment of violence, of where animals and beings are turned into things that always brings out the worst in people. Slavery in the United States brought out the worst in people. This is not only bad for the slaves, it's bad for the slave owners, for us, for us who are doing the abuse, because it makes us disconnect from our natural compassion. If that's what is happening to these animals, I mean to the human beings and to the animals on in these situations on these factory farms. And so the underlying message, I think, really of our movement is to bring our consciousness to a higher level. Then there's another level, too, that the violence towards the animals that we engage in makes us disconnect from our heart of compassion and our heart of kindness and caring, because we don't want to think about what we're doing when we eat a piece of bacon or cheese or a piece of hamburger or hot dog.
So you have to disconnect.
We have to disconnect. So we have this whole mentality of disconnectedness, of exclusion. We learn to exclude certain beings from the sphere of our compassion. It creates a culture of war. And so for us to think we want to stop the war, and yet we're going to continue the war on animals for food, on cows and pigs and chickens and fish and other animals, we will always have war. If I go into a restaurant and I say, oh yeah, I think I'll have some ribs, or I'll have a hamburger, and the waitress or the waiter says, good choice, that's a very good choice, we have good ribs today, and everyone just praises it, says it's a great idea, and it comes, and I just eat it, and I have no awareness that when I made that order, I was like the general in another country ordering someone to bomb someone, and he doesn't feel anything. I take out my wallet and I pay for it. I serve it to my loved ones. I serve it to my children. I eat it myself. And there's this whole mentality of disconnectedness, but there is a war. And if I actually saw what happened, and I saw into the slaughterhouse, and I saw the terror in the eyes of the poor pig or sheep or chicken or cow because of my desire, which is totally programmed by my culture. It's nothing I ever decided on my own. I'm doing it because that's what everyone says I should do. When I begin to realize that, the only way to live a spiritual life, a consequent life, a life of compassion, is to take responsibility for my actions, to become aware of the connections between my daily life and my choices and other people, other animals, other living beings, and realize that we are all connected. That's the great spiritual teaching of all the traditions, is of the interconnectedness of all life.
Dr. Will Tuttle, with wholehearted appreciation, we share your wondrous vision of a peaceful and compassionate world. May heaven bless you and your loved ones immensely for your truly constructive endeavors in benefiting other beings. To our global viewers, please stay tuned for Vegetarianism, the Noble Way of Living, right after noteworthy news here on Supreme Master Television. Wishing you peace and love.